Have you ever done something to protect your family, only to watch someone tear it all apart overnight? That's exactly what happened to me. And the very next morning, karma hit harder than the storm itself. The night before the storm, I stood at the edge of my driveway, shovel in hand, sweat dripping from my forehead. The air was heavy, filled with the kind of silence you only hear before a disaster. My small house sat lower than the street, and I knew one good flood could send water rushing straight inside. That's why I spent hours stacking sandbags, creating a barrier around my home. As I placed the final bag, I looked around the neighborhood. Most people were preparing too, taping windows, moving cars uphill, checking their gutters. Everyone seemed tense, but cooperative. Everyone except one person. HOA Karen. Karen wasn't just my neighbor. She was the self-appointed queen of our neighborhood's HOA, and she made it her mission to enforce every rule with an iron fist. To her, appearances mattered more than safety, and control mattered more than kindness. That night, as thunder rolled in the distance, Karen strolled past my house with a flashlight. She frowned at my sandbags as though they were graffiti on a wall. "These are against HOA regulations," she said sharply. "You'll need to remove them. Immediately." I was exhausted, soaked in sweat, and more than a little irritated. "Karen, there's a storm coming. These aren't decorations. They're here to protect my home." She crossed her arms. "The HOA handbook clearly states that front yards must remain uniform. No exceptions. You're breaking the rules." I stared at her, stunned. "Uniform? We're about to get hit by a flood, and you care about uniformity?" But Karen was already walking away, muttering about citations and fines. That night, I went to bed uneasy. The storm winds howled outside, but I felt a sense of security knowing my sandbags were there. Or so I thought. Because when I woke up the next morning, the sandbags were gone. Every last one. And I didn't have to guess who did it. The sound of rushing water soon confirmed my worst fears. But before I could panic for myself, I heard a scream outside. And that's when I saw it, Karen's shiny new car, already being carried by the flood. The morning hit me like a nightmare I couldn't wake up from. The sound of rain pounding against the roof had already shaken me from sleep, but when I rushed to the window, my heart dropped. The sandbags, my only defense, were gone. The driveway was bare, water already swirling around my porch like snakes looking for a way inside. I didn't need a detective to tell me what had happened. HOA Karen had made her move. She must have come in the dead of night, dragged every single sandbag away, and left my home vulnerable to the storm. I scrambled outside, barefoot, my feet splashing into icy water. My hands were shaking as I tried to improvise a barrier with trash bins and wooden planks, but it was already too late. The street had turned into a river, water flowing downhill with unstoppable force. And then I heard it. A shriek so sharp it cut through the thunder. I spun around. Just a few houses down, Karen was on her front porch, waving her arms, her voice cracking with panic. Her brand new luxury SUV, the one she bragged about in every HOA meeting, was floating, its headlights blinking like eyes pleading for help. The water carried it down the street like a toy boat. For a moment, I stood frozen, watching the scene. There was a cruel irony in it all. She had taken away my protection, claiming it was against the rules. Now, her own prized possession was the first casualty of the storm. But instead of feeling satisfaction, something else washed over me, a heavy mix of fear and frustration. Because if the water was powerful enough to lift her car, what chance did my home have without the sandbags? Karen screamed again, this time calling my name. "Help me. Please, you have to do something." I looked at her, rain stinging my eyes, my heart pounding. "Do something?" I wanted to yell back. "You're the reason we're in this mess." But I bit my tongue. The water was rising fast. My house wasn't safe. Neither was hers. And the storm had just begun. At that moment, I realized this wasn't just about Karen's arrogance or my sandbags anymore. This was survival. And the storm didn't care about HOA rules. The question was, would we survive together, or go down blaming each other? The water showed no mercy. Within minutes, what used to be our quiet neighborhood street had transformed into a raging current. Pieces of trash cans, branches, even patio furniture floated by like wreckage from a shipwreck. Karen stood helpless on her porch, her perfect hair plastered to her face, mascara running like black rivers down her cheeks. She was yelling at anyone who would listen, but no one was coming. Everyone was too busy saving themselves. I, too, was fighting to keep control. My makeshift barriers were failing. The water seeped under the door, invading my living room. I grabbed towels, blankets, anything I could find, pressing them against the cracks, but the water laughed at my efforts. Still, Karen's voice rang out over the storm. "This is your fault," she screamed across the street. "If you hadn't put those sandbags down, the water wouldn't have redirected toward me." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Redirected?" I shouted back, my voice raw. "Karen, you removed them. You left me defenseless." But she wasn't listening. Karen never listened. To her, the storm wasn't a force of nature, it was somehow still a violation of her precious rules, and I was the scapegoat. Then, as if to punish us both, lightning struck a transformer at the end of the street. The neighborhood went black. Only the angry glow of the storm lit our homes now, flashing like a strobe light at a nightmare party. Karen gasped, clutching her porch railing. Her car was gone, swallowed by the flood, and now her house was next. Water gushed over her front steps, swirling around her ankles. "Help me," she cried again, her voice breaking this time, not with authority, but with fear. For the first time since this began, I saw her not as the overbearing HOA tyrant but as a terrified woman about to lose everything. I stood there in the rain, torn between anger and compassion. She had caused this. She had stripped away my safety. And yet, could I stand by and watch her drown in her own stubbornness? The storm didn't give me time to think. The water was rising fast. If we didn't act, we would both lose far more than cars and furniture. The pounding rain blurred the line between anger and mercy. My instincts screamed at me to focus only on my own home, to protect what little I had left. But another voice, quieter yet stronger, whispered, "If you don't help, you'll regret it forever." I pulled on my raincoat and sloshed through the flood toward Karen's house. Every step was a battle, the current tugging at my legs, threatening to sweep me off my feet. The water was already waist-deep by the time I reached her porch. Karen clung to the railing, wide-eyed. "I didn't know it would get this bad," she sobbed. I didn't want the neighborhood to look messy." Her words stung. All this destruction, over appearances. But I shoved the thought aside. "We don't have time for this. Get inside. Higher ground, now." Together we pushed into her house, slamming the door against the rushing water. Inside, the floor was already slick, water pooling across the tiles. The storm roared outside, rattling the windows. Karen's living room, usually pristine, was a mess of floating magazines and overturned chairs. She collapsed onto the staircase, hugging herself, trembling. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Just the sound of the storm, and our ragged breathing. Then, she whispered, "Why did you come for me? After everything?" I looked at her, drenched, exhausted, but certain. "Because no one deserves to face this alone. Not even you." Her eyes flickered with something I had never seen before, shame. Maybe even gratitude. The storm rattled the house again, forcing us back to the present. The water level inside was climbing fast. "We couldn't stay here. We need to get to higher ground," I said firmly. "The roof," if we have to. Otherwise, we'll both be trapped. Karen nodded, finally silent, finally listening. It wasn't a friendship. It wasn't forgiveness. It was survival. And in that fragile truce, we found ourselves bound together by something stronger than HOA rules or neighborly disputes. But as we climbed the stairs, I knew one thing for certain: this storm wasn't done with us yet. At the top of the stairs, we could see water creeping steadily upward. The storm had turned relentless, hammering the neighborhood with no sign of stopping. I scanned Karen's upstairs windows. Beyond them, rooftops poked out of the flood like islands in a dark sea. Some neighbors had already climbed onto theirs, waving flashlights, signaling for help. Karen clutched her chest, her breathing quick and shallow. What if no one comes? What if we're stuck here forever? Her words made my stomach tighten. I couldn't promise her safety. I didn't even know if my own house was still standing. But giving up wasn't an option. We'll get through this, I said, forcing confidence into my tone. But we need a way out. I searched the hallway closet and found an old rope. Not much, but it could mean the difference between being swept away or holding on. I tied it around my waist, then around hers. Karen's eyes widened. You're tying us together. I met her gaze. If one of us falls, the other pulls them up. No one gets left behind. She didn't argue. For once, Karen just nodded. We smashed open the upstairs window. Rain and wind howled through the opening, stinging our faces. The street below was gone, replaced by a swirling torrent. The only safe spot was the roof. Climb through, I urged. Karen hesitated, staring at the black water below. Her voice cracked. I can't. I'm scared. I placed a hand on her shoulder. You'll be fine. Just trust me. For a moment, I thought she'd freeze. But then, trembling, she climbed through the window. I followed, helping her onto the slippery shingles. We crouched on the roof, holding onto the rope, clinging to the last dry ground we had. The storm stretched before us, endless. Neighbors shouted in the distance, some crying, some silent. And though we were safe, for now, I knew the real test hadn't even begun. Because surviving the flood was one thing. Facing what came after would be another. The storm showed no mercy. Hours passed as Karen and I clung to her roof, the rope between us the only assurance we wouldn't be ripped away by the wind. The rain fell sideways, stinging like needles, and the cold cut through our soaked clothes. Karen shivered, hugging her knees. I've never been this scared in my life, she admitted, her voice small. I thought rules would keep everything in order. That if I controlled the little things, the big things wouldn't hurt us. I turned to her, surprised. For once, she wasn't barking orders or handing out fines. She was human, vulnerable, fragile, just like the rest of us. The world doesn't work that way, I said. Storms don't care about rules. Nature doesn't care about handbooks. Sometimes all we can do is prepare and hope it's enough. Her eyes filled with tears, though she quickly looked away, ashamed. I shouldn't have touched your sandbags. The admission hit me harder than the storm. I didn't say anything right away. Part of me wanted to shout, you think? But another part of me, tired and numb, just let it settle. Maybe it was the closest thing to an apology I'd ever get from her. Lightning flashed, revealing more destruction below, cars piled against fences, water swallowing entire yards. Somewhere, a dog barked desperately before being silenced by the storm. My stomach twisted. Will anyone come? Karen whispered. I forced myself to stay calm, even though doubt clawed at me too. Rescue teams are out there. They'll come. We just have to hold on. We sat in silence after that, the storm our only companion. But deep down, I knew we weren't out of danger yet. Because while the water might recede, the damage it left behind would change everything. Sometime in the darkest hours of the night, exhaustion overtook me. When I opened my eyes again, the sky was turning gray. The rain had slowed, though the streets still raged with water. Karen stirred beside me, her face pale, lips trembling. She looked like she hadn't slept a second. But before either of us could speak, a distant sound broke through, the low hum of a motor. I sat up quickly. "Do you hear that?" Karen blinked, straining her ears. Then her eyes lit up. "A boat. It's a rescue boat." Sure enough, through the mist and rain, a small motorboat appeared, weaving between rooftops. A man in an orange jacket waved to us, shouting over the water. Karen jumped to her feet, nearly slipping. "Here. We're here," she screamed, waving her arms wildly. The boat pulled closer, bumping gently against the side of the house. The rescuer extended a hand. "You two all right? Let's get you out of here." Karen practically dove into the boat, clutching the rescuer like a lifeline. I followed more carefully, steadying myself against the slippery shingles before climbing aboard. As we sped away, I glanced back at Karen's house. Water still swallowed the first floor, windows shattered, furniture bobbing inside. Her perfect kingdom, reduced to ruins overnight. Karen stared too, her face unreadable. For once, she was silent. No blame, no rules, just a hollow, broken expression. The rescuer shouted over the engine. "We're taking you to the shelter at the high school. You'll be safe there." Safe. The word felt strange after everything we'd endured. But even as relief settled over me, a heaviness lingered. Because surviving the storm was only the beginning. Now, we had to face what came after, the losses, the rebuilding, and the truths Karen could no longer ignore. The shelter buzzed with chaos. Families huddled under blankets, children cried, volunteers rushed back and forth with food and supplies. The gymnasium smelled of damp clothes and fear. Karen and I sat side by side on folding chairs, wrapped in donated blankets. She looked smaller now, diminished without her usual authority. People whispered when they saw her, the woman who ran the HOA, now stripped of control. I couldn't help noticing how different she seemed. No clipboard, no sharp tone. Just silence. After a long pause, she spoke. "You were right. About the sandbags. About everything." I didn't answer at first. Part of me still burned with anger, replaying the image of my empty driveway, the water rushing into my home. But when I looked at her, broken, humbled, I realized the fight had drained out of both of us. "My house is probably gone," I said quietly. She flinched. "Mine too. And my car," her voice trailed off. She didn't need to finish. For the first time, we sat together not as enemies, but as survivors. Later that night, volunteers passed out hot soup. Karen clutched hers like it was the only warmth left in the world. She whispered again, "I never thought rules could fail me. But when the water came, rules didn't matter. Only people did." I finally met her eyes. "Then maybe it's time you change how you lead." She didn't reply. But I saw the weight of my words sink in. Days later, when the waters receded, we returned to what was left of our neighborhood. The devastation was worse than I imagined. Streets were caked in mud, houses sagged with water damage, and the smell of rot lingered in the air. My home was barely standing. Furniture ruined, walls warped. The sandbags could have saved it, if they hadn't been removed. The ache in my chest was heavy. Karen walked beside me, her heels sinking into the mud. She stopped in front of her house, or what was left of it. Windows shattered, walls cracked, her once immaculate lawn torn to pieces. She fell to her knees, silent tears streaming down her face. For the first time, I didn't feel anger watching her cry. Only pity. She had built her life on control, on rules, and now nature had taken it all in one night. Neighbors gathered, sharing supplies, comforting one another. Karen stood apart, unsure how to fit in. She wasn't the leader anymore, just another victim. But then something unexpected happened. A young mother, whose house had been destroyed too, approached Karen. Instead of accusing her, she handed her a hammer. "We're rebuilding together. Grab some nails." Karen blinked, stunned. Slowly, she nodded. That day, we worked side by side. Clearing debris, patching roofs, helping neighbors salvage what they could. For once, Karen wasn't giving orders, she was taking them. And strangely, it felt right. Weeks later, the neighborhood began to heal. Houses were repaired, lives slowly stitched back together. The scars of the storm would never fully fade, but something had changed among us. As for Karen, she was no longer the same woman who tore down my sandbags. She still attended HOA meetings, but her voice was different. Softer. Less about control, more about community. One evening, as the sun set over our battered but recovering street, Karen approached me. She looked nervous, almost fragile. "I know I can't undo what I did," she said. "But I want you to know, I've learned. The storm taught me more than rules ever could." I studied her for a long moment. Part of me wanted to cling to the bitterness. But then I remembered the image of her clutching that porch railing, terrified, human. And I let it go. "Just remember," I said quietly, "sometimes the best protection isn't rules, it's compassion." She nodded, her eyes glistening. The storm had destroyed much, but it had also exposed truths. That control is an illusion. That neighbors need each other more than they need rules. And that sometimes, even the harshest enemies can find common ground when the floodwaters rise. Karen lost her car, her house, her pride. But maybe she gained something more valuable, humility. And as for me, I lost plenty too. But I gained a strange, unexpected peace. Because in the end, the storm didn't just wash away our homes. It washed away the walls we'd built between us. And maybe, just maybe, that was the real lesson hidden in the flood.